In 1492, a daring, audacious man set sail into the unknown, driven by an unrelenting desire to prove that the Earth was not flat, and to find a shortcut to the rich lands of the East. Christopher Columbus was no stranger to risk. His entire life had been shaped by it. He was a man consumed by dreams of glory, wealth, and fame. But what if I told you that Columbus did not set out to discover America? In fact, he didn't even know it existed. And yet, by the time his ships returned home, the course of history had changed forever. This is the story of how Christopher Columbus, against all odds, discovered America, without ever truly realizing it. It all began in a small port town in Genoa, Italy, in 1451, where Columbus was born into a modest family. From an early age, he was drawn to the sea. It wasn't just a fascination with the ocean, it was a call, a sense of destiny that pushed him to the edge of the world. At the time, the maps of Europe were almost as limited as their knowledge of the world beyond. But Columbus, fueled by a relentless curiosity and an insatiable thirst for adventure, could see past the fog of ignorance. He had an audacious belief, one that could either make or break him, that by sailing west, he could reach the fabled lands of Asia, the spices, the riches, the unimaginable wealth. But no one believed him. The establishment, made up of seasoned sailors and scholars, laughed at his idea. The earth was too vast, the seas too treacherous, and the concept of a shortcut to Asia seemed insane. Yet Columbus was undeterred, because he had one thing most people lacked: vision. His first attempt to secure royal backing for his expedition was a disaster. He went to Portugal, to the court of King John II, with his bold plan in hand. The king, like everyone else, dismissed him. He couldn't see past his own limited understanding of geography. But Columbus was not a man who took no for an answer. He packed up, moved to Spain, and presented his vision to Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. They too were skeptical. Why? Because despite all the riches of the world they could conquer, Spain was embroiled in its own religious wars. Its attention was focused on pushing out the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula. But Isabella, whose ambition was as fiery as Columbus's, saw something in him, a sense of determination, a risk worth taking. She agreed to fund the voyage, but on one condition: Columbus would be rewarded with titles and wealth if he succeeded. On August 3, 1492, the expedition set sail. Columbus and his 3 ships, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, left Spain's shores with the hopes of finding a passage to Asia. But what Columbus didn't know was that what lay ahead of him wasn't just a journey into uncharted waters. It was a leap into the unknown, a quest for destiny. As the ships sailed farther from the coast, doubt began to seep into the hearts of his crew. The days turned into weeks, and the once confident sailors began whispering about mutiny. They had seen no land, and the horizon seemed endless. Hunger and fear crept into the hearts of the men. But Columbus, his eyes fixed on a distant promise of glory, pressed on. He refused to turn back. And then, on October 12th, after 36 days at sea, land was sighted. The crew erupted in a frenzy, some shouting in joy, others in disbelief. Columbus, however, did not know where he was. He thought he had finally reached Asia, the land of riches and untold wealth. The island he landed on was not China or Japan, as he believed, but an uncharted paradise in the Caribbean, an unknown world that had been untouched by Europeans for centuries. He named it San Salvador. But instead of being hailed as the man who discovered a new world, Columbus thought he had reached the outskirts of the East Indies. He believed the native people he encountered were Indians, a term that would stick, misleading future generations about the true identity of the continent. But let's take a step back and think about this. Was Columbus really the first to discover America? Of course not. There had been others before him. Vikings, for example, had reached the shores of North America nearly 500 years earlier. But Columbus's journey was different. It wasn't about finding new land. It was about changing the world's perspective of what was possible. Columbus's voyage opened the floodgates for exploration, for the Age of Discovery, a period that reshaped the globe. It wasn't the first step, But it was the crucial one, the one that set off a chain reaction of events that would eventually lead to the creation of a new world. In the aftermath of his landing, Columbus made further explorations around the Caribbean, believing he had stumbled upon islands near the Asian continent. His encounters with the indigenous people were complex and, at times, brutal. He and his men enslaved the natives, took their gold, and began a process of colonization that would forever alter the course of history. Columbus didn't find gold or spices, but he did find something far more valuable. He found a route to a vast and mysterious world that would eventually be the cradle of the Americas. In a sense, he didn't discover America as much as he reintroduced it to the world. His travels ignited an exploration frenzy that would lead to the creation of empires, the birth of new nations, and the subjugation of millions of people. But let's pause again. Why does this matter? Why is Columbus's voyage such a monumental event? Was it because he was the first to reach the Americas? No. It was because his journey reshaped history in ways that no one could have imagined. The ripple effects of Columbus's discovery, if you can even call it that, echoed through time, leading to a global exchange of goods, ideas, cultures, and, tragically, diseases. It was the beginning of a new world order, a world that would eventually lead to the rise of empires, the spread of Christianity, the displacement of indigenous peoples, and the creation of a global economy that we still live with today. But here's where things get even more intriguing. Columbus's impact was not just geographic. His journey challenged the very nature of exploration itself. What does it mean to discover something? To claim something for the first time? For Columbus, the act of discovery was not just about finding new land. It was about the act of knowing it, of laying claim to it, of opening the doors to future conquest. Columbus's journey proved that the Earth was not a flat, unchanging place. It was a living, breathing globe, filled with infinite possibilities. His voyage represented the power of human will, the determination to push beyond the limits of the known world and find something new, something different. But in doing so, he set in motion a series of events that would irrevocably change the lives of millions of people around the world. The paradox of Columbus's journey is this: he set sail to find one thing, Asia, and instead, he found something entirely different, something far greater than he ever imagined. Columbus's discovery of America wasn't just a geographical event. It was a cultural and historical pivot, a point in time when the world began to shrink, when civilizations on opposite ends of the Earth collided in ways that no one could have anticipated. This was not just the discovery of a landmass, it was the birth of a new world, one where everything we knew about history, geography, and humanity would change forever. Columbus died, believing that he had found the edge of the East, but his legacy lived on in the explorers who followed in his wake. He opened the door, but it was the likes of Ferdinand Magellan, Hernán Cortés, and others who would push further, uncovering the treasures in the darkness of the New World. Columbus's journey was just the beginning of a new era, one that would bring great riches, great suffering, and the creation of the modern world. So, the next time you think about Christopher Columbus and his journey, remember this: his discovery wasn't about the first step into a new world. It was about the chain reaction that it set off. It was the beginning of a story that continues to shape our world today, a story filled with triumph, tragedy, and the unending quest to explore the unknown. And maybe, just maybe, the most profound discovery of all was not the land he found, but the way it changed the way we see the world and each other. Columbus's voyage marked the dawn of a new era of exploration, but it was also a period of profound contradictions. For the indigenous peoples of the Americas, his arrival was the start of a dark chapter, one that would see their lands colonized, their cultures disrupted, and their populations decimated by foreign diseases and violence. Yet, for Europe, the discovery opened up a wealth of new opportunities. New trade routes were forged, and entire economies flourished as Europe began to capitalize on the vast resources of the Americas. This marked the beginning of a global exchange, what we now call the Columbian Exchange, which reshaped the world in ways both magnificent and catastrophic. The Columbian Exchange was a complex and multifaceted phenomenon. It wasn't just the transfer of crops, animals, and goods. It was the mingling of societies, the spread of ideas, technologies, and, sadly, diseases. The introduction of European crops like wheat and sugar revolutionized agricultural practices in the New World, while the introduction of maize, potatoes, and tomatoes from the Americas transformed diets in Europe, leading to population booms. However, alongside these positive exchanges came the devastating effects of European diseases like smallpox and influenza, which decimated indigenous populations who had no immunity. Entire civilizations were wiped out in the wake of these epidemics. As the years passed, Columbus's vision of finding a shortcut to Asia was overshadowed by the far-reaching consequences of his voyages. The Spanish Empire, fueled by the riches of the Americas, grew into one of the most powerful forces in the world. This period of conquest would see the rise of vast empires, like the Spanish and Portuguese, as they carved up the New World, but it would also bring immense suffering. For the native peoples of the Americas, the arrival of Europeans meant more than just cultural disruption. It meant subjugation and violence. The legacies of colonization are still felt today, as many indigenous communities struggle to maintain their traditions and fight for their rights in a world that was forever altered by Columbus's journey. Yet, in spite of the suffering, the discovery set off a chain reaction that would ultimately lead to the establishment of new nations. The Americas, over time, would see the rise of great empires, from the Aztec and Inca to the burgeoning United States and Latin American republics. The trade and exchange that Columbus's voyage set in motion would lay the foundation for the global economy as we know it today. The story of Columbus is not simply a story of one man's journey. It is a story of transformation on a global scale, a story of civilizations colliding, of cultures blending, of history being rewritten. In retrospect, Columbus's legacy is a paradox. He is hailed as a hero by some and vilified as a villain by others. His journey unquestionably opened the door to a new world of possibilities, but it also paved the way for exploitation, enslavement, and the loss of entire cultures. Columbus himself may have never realized the full extent of his actions. He believed he had simply found a new route to Asia. But his journey undeniably set the stage for the world as we know it. Whether we see him as a pioneering explorer or as a harbinger of colonialism, one thing is certain. His voyage changed history forever. The story of Columbus is not just about the man. It's about the world he helped create. A world that continues to shape our lives today, for better or for worse.